The sentence drops into the middle of a dinner I spent all day preparing. We have both families over. His parents, my mother, my younger brother Theo, two couples who have been in our lives so long they feel like furniture. The table is set carefully because that is how I do things. The food is good because I made sure it would be. My husband, Rowan, is standing near the kitchen island with a glass of something amber, telling the kind of story he likes to tell at gatherings, the kind where he is the smartest person in it, where his instincts save the day, where everyone around him is lucky to have had him there. He has been getting louder as the evening goes on. I have been watching it from across the room the way you watch weather. Then he turns and looks at me. He smiles. Let's be honest, he says. Without me, she'd be nothing. The word hangs in the air. Not struggling, not lost, nothing. My fork is in my hand. I am aware of this the way you become aware of small physical things when your brain has stopped doing its normal work and started doing something else. Something slower, something that is paying very close attention. He is still smiling. He thinks he said something clever. The room changes, not loudly, not with anyone gasping or pushing back their chair or saying the word that would interrupt him. It changes the way rooms change when something ugly has been said out loud, with a specific quality of stillness that is not peace. My mother-in-law picks up her wineglass and looks at its contents. My brother sets down his fork. The couple to my left, friends we have had for 6 years, people I have cooked for dozens of times, people whose children I have brought gifts for and whose emergencies I have helped manage, find something interesting to examine in the centerpiece. No one says anything. I understand why. I know the calculation that happens between hearing something and deciding whether to respond, how much it costs to speak and how much it costs the other person if you don't. Everyone at this table runs the numbers. Everyone at this table comes out the same way. My husband takes a sip of his drink. He hasn't looked away from me. He is watching to see what I will do with what he just said. Whether I will laugh and let the room breathe. Whether I will bristle and give him something to correct. Whether I will cry and prove his point. I don't do any of those things. No one defends me. I want to be honest about this part, because it would be easy to write it away or explain it or say that everyone was simply surprised and that given more time they would have said something. Maybe that is true. I don't know. What I know is what actually happened. My mother, who has known me for 38 years, who was there for every version of me that mattered, looks at the table. My brother glances at me once. The glance contains something real. It contains, I see this, and I am sorry, and I am afraid of what happens if I speak. Then he goes back to his food. Rowan's mother makes a sound that is almost a laugh and almost a deflection and is neither. Rowan's father says something about the pasta. The table follows him there with the grateful energy of people who have been offered a way out of something they don't want to be inside. Rowan puts his glass down and goes back to eating. The sentence is already becoming history. It is being filed under the thing that happened that no one addressed. I keep eating. My face is calm, but something underneath it has changed. He glances at me between bites. Quick, checking, the way someone checks on a thing they've affected to see how the effect is landing. I am not giving him the effect he wanted. I know what he expected. I have been married to this man for 10 years. I know his reads of rooms and the specific version of me he has built inside his head, a woman who can be tilted off balance by a sentence delivered in front of witnesses. He expected something. He got nothing. Not the polished nothing of someone performing composure. The real nothing of someone who has passed through shock and arrived at something on the other side. I pick up my glass. I drink. I talk to Rowan's father about something I know he finds interesting, and I listen because his father is worth listening to and because whatever is happening inside me is mine and requires no audience. Rowan watches me across the table. I feel it, but I don't return it. Later, after the dishes are done and the guests are gone and Rowan is in the living room with his phone, I go upstairs. I close the bathroom door. I stand in front of the mirror. I look at myself for a long time. Let me tell you who I am before I tell you what I became. My name is Iris Calloway. I am 38 years old. I have been married to a man named Rowan Calloway for 10 years. I met him when I was 27 and thought the best thing I could do with my skills was put them in service of something that mattered. My husband said I'd be nothing without him after 10 years. 1 year later, he saw my name everywhere. I was, before the marriage reshaped me, a content strategist and editorial consultant who built brand voice for organizations that didn't yet know who they were. I had clients and a reputation in a community of people who knew what that work was worth. When Rowan's communications consultancy started growing in year 2 of our marriage, I began helping him the way I helped everyone, by identifying what was missing and building it. I wrote the methodology document that became his firm's signature framework. I developed the editorial standards his team used for 4 years. I shaped the voice that won him the clients he still has. And year by year, I did this while also managing our home and the invisible architecture that makes everything else possible. He was the face. I was the pen. He forgot who was holding it. Before the cruelty, there was something real. I need to say this because the comfortable version of this story begins with a villain and ends with his defeat, and that is not quite right. The comfortable version skips the years that were genuinely good. The years when Rowan told his colleagues his wife was the reason his materials were coherent, that she had an instinct for language, that he didn't know what he would have done without her. Those years were real. I believed in them. And I think that's actually the most important part, not that he lied from the beginning, but that he stopped being honest along the way and I didn't notice because it didn't happen in a moment. It happened gradually, and then all at once, and then you're standing in front of a mirror trying to figure out how you got here. He stopped saying what was true. He started saying what was convenient. Convenient, in this context, meant a version of our life in which he was the architect and I was a detail. A useful detail. An appreciated detail, perhaps. But a detail nonetheless. I had let that story grow around me like ivy. I was about to find out what was underneath. In the early years, he credited me. Not always in large ways. But consistently, and with what felt like genuine understanding. He introduced me to clients as his strategist and told people at dinner parties that the methodology they admired had been developed with significant input from his wife. He would come home from a meeting and say, "They loved the new positioning. You were right about the opening. I was right about a lot of things. I am someone who is right about language and structure and the logic of how a message moves from intention to reception. I have always been this." It was what I brought to the marriage, what I contributed to his work, what made me useful in ways that went beyond running a household. For years, he understood this. Then something shifted. He started presenting work I had drafted without mentioning whose draft it was. He started describing the methodology document, the one I had written across 3 weekends in year 2, the one that currently lived on his company's website under his name, as something his firm had developed over time. Over time, I was there. I remember the weekends. But I stayed quiet because staying quiet had become the path of least friction, and I had confused least friction with most peace. They are not the same thing. The jokes arrived in year 6. I can be precise about this because I have been precise about most things in my life. I remember the first one. We were at a work dinner and someone asked me what I did. Rowan answered for me. He said I was the home base, that I kept things running on the domestic side so he could focus on the work. He said it warmly, patted my hand. The client smiled. I sat with the specific smile of someone translated inaccurately, deciding whether to correct the record. I did not. That was the first joke. The first reduction. The first time the public version of me was smaller than the actual version. The second time was at a gathering 6 months later when he said, "She'd be lost without me," and laughed, and people laughed, and I laughed too, the way you laugh at something you have decided not to take personally. The third time, and the fourth, and the fifth, each one slightly sharper, slightly more confident, slightly more comfortable being said in front of more people. He practiced the version of me he preferred until it felt true. Then he said it at a dinner table in front of both our families and waited to see if I would finally believe it. I did more so that he could look like he was doing everything. I want to be clear about the logistics of this because I think the logistics matter. It is easy to say that a wife was the hidden force behind a husband's success and leave it abstract. I am not interested in abstract. I am interested in the specific. I wrote the first 4 case studies on his firm's website. He told clients he would get them written. I wrote them. They have been generating inquiries for 5 years. I managed the onboarding communications for 3 of his largest clients in year 4. He presented the results at an industry panel 2 years later as evidence of his firm's client management capabilities. When a major proposal fell apart in year 7, I rebuilt it overnight and he submitted it the next morning. They won the contract. He called it a comeback story. It was my comeback, my hands, my overnight hours. He didn't lie exactly. He just stopped saying whose hands were on what. And I, because I was tired, or because I believed the work mattered more than the credit, or because I had compressed my own sense of what I was worth into something that fit inside his acknowledgement, let him. The invisible work had no name. In the early years I would sometimes say to Rowan, "This is what I did this week. Here are the outcomes." He would nod. He would say he appreciated it. Nothing would change about how he talked about the business or about me. I stopped naming it somewhere in year 6 or 7. Not because the work stopped, it didn't, but because naming it had started to feel like asking for something I shouldn't have to ask for, and asking for something you shouldn't have to ask for is its own particular kind of exhaustion. So I just did it. I scheduled, I drafted, I organized, I managed the vendor relationships that kept his office functional. I edited the quarterly reports his junior staff produced and which went out, uncorrected, under his signature. I did all of this from inside the house that I also managed, from behind the scenes of a life I had built for 2 people, from the invisible position I had backed myself into over 10 years of making someone else the center of his own story. The work was real. It was good. It had no name. And one night at a dinner party, the man I had done it for looked at me and called it nothing. He became the builder. I became the background. I don't know exactly when this became the structure of our marriage. There was a version of us, in the early years, where the credit felt more honestly distributed and the story we told included both of us. At some point, without a meeting or a decision or a conversation where we agreed to rearrange things, I became the background. Part of this was practical. He had the public role. I had the private one. Public roles accumulate credit faster, not because they involve more work, but because they involve more witnesses. Part of it was something else. Part of it was that I let it happen because I believed, for years, that the internal structure of a marriage mattered more than its external perception. That what we knew to be true between us was more real than what other people observed. What I failed to account for was the way external perception reshapes internal reality. When enough people believe the version of you that exists for them, and the person closest to you promotes it consistently, you lose track of the original. I had lost track. I was sitting at a table I had set while a man called me nothing. And some part of me, beneath the fork in my hand, was still afraid he might be right. I stopped correcting him years before the dinner. I stopped in the small moments first. When he said he had written something I had written, when he took credit for an idea I had raised, when he described our life in ways that left me out. I would think, it's not worth it. The relationship matters more than the credit. He didn't know the truth. Or he had known it and it had become more comfortable not to. When I stopped correcting the small moments grew. They grew into the standard version. The version that everyone around us started to believe because we both seemed to agree on it, him by assertion, me by silence. My silence was not agreement. But silence looks like agreement from the outside. I had let a decade of unchallenged assertions build a picture of a woman who existed in her husband's orbit and was grateful for it. That picture was not me. But it had started to feel like me. And sitting at the table, watching no one push back against the word he used, watching the room accept it so easily, like it fit something they had already believed, I understood something for the first time clearly. The story about who I was had been told so long that even I had started to live inside it. And now I'm sitting at the table. The same table I set this morning with the good linens, the centerpiece I positioned, the candles I adjusted. I am sitting here watching myself be erased in real time. Not violently, not with raised voices or obvious malice. With the particular smoothness of something that has been happening for so long that it now happens without effort. He said it. The table absorbed it. Life continued. And I am sitting in the chair I always sit in the room I always manage, at the gathering I always organize, being described as nothing by the person who benefits most from everything I do. The candles are still lit. The food is still good. There is bread I made from scratch because he mentioned once, 3 years ago, that he liked fresh bread at dinner parties and I filed it away and I have been making it ever since. I look at the bread. I think about the filing away. The remembering. The quiet act of keeping track of what someone wants and making sure it exists. That is not nothing. That is not even close to nothing. But I have been letting him name it, and he has been naming it wrong, and tonight is the night that I understand that I have to start naming it myself. I don't argue with him. I want to be honest about this choice because it looks like something it isn't. From the outside, staying quiet might look like acceptance. Like I've absorbed what he said and folded it into myself the way I have absorbed so many things over 10 years. It is not acceptance. I go quiet the way a person goes quiet when they've just understood something they can't ununderstand. I eat my dinner. I clear the dishes when dinner is over. I load the dishwasher. I make coffee for the people who want coffee. I do all the things I always do because they still need doing and I am still the person who does them. I have been clarified. There is a difference. When everyone is gone, Rowan tells me it was a good evening. He says this while scrolling through his phone and not looking at me. He does not mention what he said at the table. He does not ask if I am okay. He is already in the next thing, the way he is always already in the next thing. I say good night. I go upstairs. I start to think. I stand in the bathroom with the door closed and the mirror in front of me and I look. I look the way you look at something you have been passing for years without stopping. The painting in the hallway you no longer see because you are always on your way somewhere. I stopped being familiar to myself somewhere in the last 10 years. There was no single moment where I registered the loss. It was accumulative, unnoticed in individual increments, only visible as a total. The woman in the mirror is 38 years old. She has good hands. I notice this. Capable hands, the kind that have done serious work and could do more. She has a face still hers even though she has been living inside someone else's version of it. She has knowledge no one has been asking about and skills she stopped applying to anything with her name on it. She has spent 10 years being essential to someone else's story while disappearing from her own. And tonight a man stood at a kitchen island and told a room full of people that she was nothing. I look at her. I look at myself. Something happens that I do not have a word for. Not anger, not grief, not resolve. Something that contains all three and is sharper than any of them. I go to sleep. I wake up before he does. The question that finds me in the morning is not the one I expected. I thought I would wake up angry. I thought the question would be, how could he say that? I had a confrontation mapped out in my head. But that is not the question that is waiting for me when I sit down at the kitchen table with my coffee while the house is still quiet and his footsteps are still absent from upstairs. The question is this: why did part of me believe it? Not all of me, not the loudest part. But there was a part, small, trained, the part that has been quietly shaped by years of being spoken about in a certain way, that reached for what he said and found something like recognition. That is the question I have to sit with. He didn't build that recognition alone. I helped by going quiet in rooms where I should have spoken, by letting his version become the shared version. I am not going to spend energy being angry at him. I am going to spend it understanding what allowed me to half believe him. And then I am going to dismantle it, piece by careful piece, starting now. The morning after the dinner party, I open a document on my laptop. Not to write anything for him. Not to draft something for his firm or edit a proposal or smooth out language in a report that will have his name on it. For myself, I start writing what I know how to do, not what I used to do, but what I know. The knowledge that has been sitting in me through 10 years of holding together someone else's career. Content strategy, editorial voice development, brand positioning, the craft of taking something complex and making it speakable, the craft of identifying what is missing from a piece of communication and knowing exactly what to add. I write for a long time. By the time Rowan comes downstairs and asks about breakfast, I have 2 pages. He finds something in the refrigerator. I go back to my document. I am not planning anything dramatic. I am not building a case. I am simply remembering, on purpose, systematically, with the same methodical attention I have given to everything else in my life, who I was before this marriage decided who I was allowed to be. It takes longer than I expected. There is more there than I remembered. I go back to the work I did before the marriage swallowed it. With the specific focus of someone running an inventory. I still have the client files. 3 years of content strategy work, organized in a hard drive sitting in my desk drawer, patient and waiting. Proposals I wrote. Brand documents I developed. Feedback I received that was specific and positive and came from people who understood the field. I read through them. The work is good. I say this without false modesty and without performance. I know what good content strategy looks like. I have been doing it professionally and unprofessionally for 15 years. The files in this hard drive are good. The thinking is clear. The execution is strong. I had told myself, over the years of stepping back from it, that the field had passed me by. That I was out of date. That returning would require starting over. Reading these files, I understand that this was not true. It was a story I had accepted because it was convenient. Because accepting it meant not having to try. Because not trying meant not failing. Because failing would have confirmed what Rowan had been slowly teaching me to believe. I was afraid to find out if he was right. I am done being afraid. I open a new file. I start writing again. The skills I had called support work turned out to have a market value I had stopped checking. I had been thinking of what I did as supplementary background work that doesn't have its own price tag. This was not accurate. I discovered this by doing what I should have done years ago. I spent a week reading about the current landscape of content strategy consulting. I read job postings, industry newsletters, conversations happening in professional communities I had exited quietly and without announcement when my role at home expanded to fill all available time. What I found was that the work I had been giving away inside my marriage was being purchased, at real rates, in real markets, by organizations that needed exactly what I knew how to provide. Editorial voice development, content system architecture, messaging strategy for firms without in-house expertise. I had built all of these things for Rowan's firm. I could build them for other people. For other people who would pay for them. For other people who would know I had built them. I sent a message to a woman named Priyanka, a former colleague. I told her I was moving back into consulting and asked if she knew of anyone who might be a fit. She responded in 4 hours with 3 names. The people I had met through Rowan remembered me differently than he did. I had assumed, without thinking to question it, that the professional relationships I had developed in the context of his work were his, tethered to him, meaningful only through his firm. I was wrong. The clients I had managed communication for, the ones whose onboarding I had handled in year 4, the ones whose events I had written content for, the ones whose proposals I had rescued, had formed their own impressions of me. Impressions that were not filtered through Rowan's version of things. When I reached out cautiously and without explanation, simply saying I was doing independent work and wondering if they knew of projects I might be a fit for, several of them responded with something I had not expected. Warmth. Not the polite warmth of someone being courteous. The specific warmth of someone who is glad to hear from a person they found effective and reliable and clear. One of them said, "I always wondered why you weren't doing this on your own." Another said, "Honestly, I thought you were the one running things over there." I did not tell them that I had thought so too. I thanked them. I kept my head. I added their names to the document I was building. I build without announcing it. This matters. It is a choice I make deliberately in the first months after the dinner, when the impulse to perform my recovery for an audience, even just for Rowan, even just to watch his face while he figured out what was happening, is genuinely present. I do not perform. I work. The first independent project comes through Priyanka in month 2. It is small, a brand voice document for a nonprofit that needs help articulating its mission. I do it with complete attention and considerable care. The client is happy. They ask if I can do the next thing. I do the next thing. In month 4 a second client comes through the first client. In month 5 a third comes through a reference I hadn't expected from someone in Rowan's network. Someone who knew my work and not his, though they had met through the same door. I raise my rate in month 6. People pay it. Something is rebuilding that is entirely mine, not in service of anyone else's story, not invisible by design, not folded into the background of a life that has someone else at its center. Mine. It is slow. It is not glamorous. It is the most clarifying thing I have done in 10 years. The work starts appearing in places that have my name on them. This happens gradually and then with increasing momentum, which is how most real things happen when you are actually building them rather than waiting for them. A case study I write gets featured in a client's industry newsletter. The byline says, Iris Calloway, editorial consultant. 2 people contact me because of that byline. A podcast that covers content strategy asks if I'll speak on an episode about voice development for emerging brands. I say yes. I prepare carefully. The conversation goes well. The host says, at the end, that she hopes we can do a follow-up. Priyanka shares the episode with a note that says she's proud of me. Rowan doesn't mention it. He may not have heard it. Or he may have heard it and not known what to do with it, which is a different kind of not mentioning. I am not doing this for Rowan to notice. I am doing it because it is the work I should have been doing all along. The work I stopped because I was convinced my function was to support someone else's version rather than to do my own. I was wrong about that. And I am correcting the error. One byline at a time. 1 year after the dinner party, someone mentions my name to Rowan. He tells me about it that same night. Not because he is proud, the expression he brings home is not pride. It is the particular expression of a person encountering information that doesn't fit the category it's supposed to fit in. He comes in while I am at my desk, the desk that is now the center of the room rather than a surface I occasionally use in the margins of other activities. I ran into Felix today, he says. He mentioned you were doing consulting work. Felix is a former client of Rowan's firm. He is also, as of 3 months ago, a client of mine. I am, I say. He said you'd done something for his team. I did, I say. It went well. Rowan stands in the doorway of my office. He looks at the desk. At the papers on it. At the organized evidence of work being done. He says, I didn't know you were still connected with Felix. Here is the thing I notice. He did not say I didn't know you were doing this work. He said he didn't know about the connection. The work itself has not yet fully entered his operating picture. Felix reached out, I say. Rowan nods. He goes downstairs. I turn back to what I was doing. It keeps happening, not constantly, not with dramatic confrontation or a single revelatory scene. In the steady, accumulating way of reality asserting itself against a story that was never accurate. His former business partner mentions my name at an event. She had attended a panel I participated in and she says to Rowan, according to his account, that I was really impressive. He relays this to me with the particular flatness of someone reading information they haven't processed yet. His brother texts him the link to a piece I wrote for an industry publication. Just the link, no note. His brother is the kind of person who sends links without comment when he thinks something is worth sending. A friend of Rowan's asks at a dinner I cooked whether she can connect with me about a project. She says my name. She directs the question at me, not at him. He is sitting 4 seats away. He hears her say it. He hears the context. And something is happening behind his face that I have not seen before. Not guilt, not regret, something more complicated. The specific rearrangement of a person who is realizing that the map they have been using does not match the territory. I give my card to his friend. I refill a wineglass. I finish the meal. When he finally sees my name in a context that he cannot set aside, he is quiet for a long time. I don't describe the specific moment in detail because I have found, in the year since the dinner party, that I am not interested in cataloging his realizations for an audience. That is his business. What is mine is the life I have been building. 6 independent clients. A rate I would not have believed possible 12 months ago. A byline in an industry publication I had respected. A network connected to my name, my reputation, independent of anyone else's story. I am visible now. In spaces he never expected me to occupy without him. He said I would be nothing without him. He was locating my value in his proximity, saying my worth was borrowed from his. What he didn't understand was that the capability was always mine. The skills, the relationships, the thinking that made his firm coherent for 10 years. None of that belonged to him. He borrowed from me. He just never noticed. When he sees my name now, in the places where it lives, I don't explain. He doesn't ask me to. Some things explain themselves.